I got a question from one of the parents. The child has a diagnosis of autism, and just going to a park every day, will that be enough to replace occupational therapy? And I love that question. It's awesome. Now, I really, really emphasize on going outdoors and doing a lot of outdoor play. And, yeah, there are a lot of options, is what this parent has mentioned, which, of course, there are a lot of options where they can go on jungle gyms, they can do swings, and so many of them. So, if a child is neurotypical, that child doesn't definitely need a occupational therapy or a sensory diet from a therapist. But when I talk about a child who has a diagnosis of autism, there are sensory processing challenges. And when there are sensory processing challenges, the way the sensory input is taken, okay, which means how I receive, it's like, if I give you a simple example, I personally, if I have milk, I cannot tolerate milk. So if I have milk, and if I drink milk, I know milk is going to, I mean, everybody knows that milk is very helpful. But for my body specifically, if I drink milk, I'll immediately rush to the toilet. What does that mean? I cannot absorb milk. Okay. Why am I sharing this? That is diet. So that same way, there are kids, when you give them sensory input, which means it could be something like jumping on a trampoline. Okay. It could be something like just swinging on a swing. It could be something like maybe sitting on a merry-go-round. Whatever. These are all wonderful sensory diet opportunities. But when you go to an occupational therapist, because they're trained, they will teach you and you will learn whether, I mean, I've worked with kids where child is jumping on the trampoline and I find that the child is getting really disorganized. What are the ways that you would know that child is getting disorganized? Is this input helping the child, or is this input disorganizing the child? So for example, milk for me, it helps everybody, but it doesn't help me, so I'm not going to have milk, right? If some kids, who can't have wheat, so if they have wheat, they get bloating, they get, they feel clouded, they feel gassy. So now wheat, chapati for that matter, would not, or bread would not help a child. Okay. For example, if that child is sensitive to gluten, what I'm trying to communicate is, if a child is not comfortable and not able to process that linear vertical input, jumping on a trampoline, and if that's disorganizing the child, if a child is not comfortable with the angular input on a swing, and that input is disorganizing the child. If the child is not comfortable with merry-go-rounds, that's an orbital input, and that is disorganizing the child. If a child, there are those kinds of rotatory chairs in the park, and if the child sits on it and is not comfortable with that input, how would you know as a parent whether it's organizing or disorganizing? You would not know. So you will need an occupational therapist who will teach you that, see, this is what's happening, and this is the input which is not helping your child, and this is the input that is helping. And then when you provide those inputs and your child improves, then your therapist would observe again, okay, this input is better and this is not. It's simple about the fact that you need guidance, you need mentoring. You need mentoring to know what to provide to your child and what to not provide. What input is organizing and which input is not organizing, right? And if you see my lecture where I've spoken in depth about a sensory processing disorder, the pyramid, the learning pyramid has vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile as the base. And if a child is not able to process the vestibular input, not able to process the proprioceptive and the tactile input, and there is disorganization, then the areas on the top of the pyramid would not develop. So if you just take a child to a park and your child is doing activities, you don't know whether it's organizing, disorganizing, helping, not helping, but you're still taking your child. It would not replace what an occupational therapist would do. That outdoor activity is just the diet. Okay, okay, do this with your child and do that with your child. But what is the intervention? What specifically, which input is needed more? When I do my group mentoring sessions with parents and I watch the videos of kids, and I'm like, look, when your child is swinging on a swing outdoors, this is what is happening. So you don't have to do this. Or when your child is in the lycra, this is what is happening. So you don't have to do this, but you have to do that. So this kind of a guidance is what a therapist can provide you. And when, if I go back to my analogy about the milk, so I cannot take milk, but I can take coconut milk, and I have coconut milk. Sol curdy is something that, you put kokum. I don't know what is a Hindi or English word for kokum, but when I put that in the coconut milk and I drink it, it suits my system. So I will take those, instead of milk, right? Now, this kind of an awareness is what an occupational therapist would give you. If I keep giving an input which your child is getting disorganized, because of which your child is getting disorganized, you're not going to move ahead with the what you call, with the development. All that we want for our kids is developmental gains. So which vestibular input to give, angular, linear, vertical, orbital, and if that is done, then what's next? Okay, this is done, then what next? This kind of a guidance and this kind of a modification in the program would be suggested to you by an occupational therapist. So if you just take your child out in the park and let him play, it does not it will not be able to replace what an occupational therapist would do. But when it comes to a child who's neurotypical, they are able to process the vestibular input. They're able to challenge themselves and provide that just right challenge. They know what is helping, what is not helping. They know when to stop. Those kinds of, interoceptive awareness, what we call that kind of an awareness. Ki this is what I think feels right to my body. This does not feel right to my body. That kind of an awareness is not present in a child who's neurodiverse. So just taking a child to a park and expecting that, okay, just doing occupational, doing sensory diet will replace OT? No. Just doing basketball and football and swimming will replace OT? No. If you want to maintain your gains that your child is at, then those are fine. But if you want to go beyond and take your child to the next level, you will need mentoring. You will need a therapist to guide you on what needs to be done. I see this as a map, basically. So if I go on a trek, and if I have to go, say, to a Himalayan trek, for example, and if my guide tells me, Reena, pack your woolens, pack these many woolens, take these kinds of shoes, take this water, and rest I'll take care of it, and whatever, if I'm guided well by that guide, I will know how to navigate it. But with a child who has a diagnosis of autism, if you don't have the guidance on where to go, it's like going to a trek without any preparation. You don't know what shoes to carry, what clothes to carry, how much weight to carry, where would you wait if there is a storm or whatever. What I'm trying to convey is an occupational therapist who's had that experience of working with kids who have a diagnosis of autism or a neurodiverse child knows about sensory processing, knows about which sensory interventions would help, knows what are the signs for organizing and disorganizing. And she or he would know how to take your child from here to the next level, and then from here to the next level. And that would be very, very apparent and visible in the improvements that you would see in your child's behavior. So your question was, can outdoor play in the park replace occupational therapy? Of course not, because you need guidance on what to do when you go to a park. I hope I have explained it well. And if you feel, Arpita, I think Arpita Roy asked this question. So if you feel this is not helpful, or if you need more clarification, put it in the comments. I would love to share my views, and I love the question. Okay. Thank you.